Welcome. I have with me today William Edmundson, and William has executive experience in co-working, franchise businesses, and hospitality. And William, I'm going to sneak in a couple of bonus questions about your perspective on sort of the transition to the workplace being hospitality focused, because I think you would have a lot to add to that. So William is also the current executive director of the Global Workspace Association, just executed a fantastic conference a few weeks ago. William, I'm guessing you're still slightly recovering because it's a major undertaking.
Absolutely. Great team effort. And we couldn't be happier about how it turned out.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, Gio and I did a kind of a debrief on the other podcast and agreed. Lots of positive experiences, great interactions. It was everything a conference should be, I think. So I can't wait for the next one already.
And I got to tell you, Jamie, it was amplified because we hadn't gotten to be together as a group. So that I think really just amped the whole thing up. So
yeah. And I think even the next one will have a similar vibe just because, people don't spend as much time in person together. So good. And then you are doing some consulting and advisory work in a variety of industries. And that is partly why I wanted to bring you on to chat today, because you do a lot of work with EOS and helping companies integrate EOS, learn how to use it, and practice it. And I know you did that with the Global Workspace Association team, which hugely elevated kind of how the team worked together. And even, though it was a relatively small team, and I love the EOS system, the book traction, and just wanted to kind of chat about some of the work that you're doing and what traction can look like, or the EOS. I always go back and forth. You can help me with the vernacular.
Sure.
Can look like for folks who want kind of a more like systemized approach to running their business, even if it's a smaller business or a few locations. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. So you're in Houston. What's the weather like in Houston in the fall?
Back home.
Yeah.
Just in time. We moved back when it was still oppressive from Colorado. Okay. Everybody thought we were crazy, but it's home, and it's always good to be home.
And mom's there, and you talk to mom almost every day. I remember you saying you're like, oh, mom knows all the details about the conference. I love that she's involved.
Just through osmosis, practically.
Totally. I love it. And then you have a son at Colorado State?
Yes, absolutely. Right? He's in their music program, and we miss being able to drive down the road and watch him perform. But thanks to the internet, we were able to watch one of his jazz concerts the other night and a classical concert the week before. So
they still stream a lot of the programming. That's fantastic.
It's not the same, but it's pretty good. We'll take it.
Yeah, totally. You can sit right in your living room with a glass of wine and put the computer up and stream away. I love it.
You know us well.
Okay, can you just share for folks who don't know William, you're pretty visible in the industry, but just a little bit about your broader background, at Abbey Hotel, the hotel industry, just kind of like you've been doing this we won't date you, but you've been in the industry for a long time. And this is your second time on the GWA board. So I would just love to kind of hear a little bit about, starting in the hospitality business and kind of the transition into flex and maybe this is where I'll sneak in my question about like, how do you think hospitality will be further integrated into flexible office and co-working?
Yeah, exactly. And some of the patterns that our industry is following that I've witnessed in hospitality. Definitely we'll cover all that. So I started out in the hotel industry. My family had some hotels when I was young, and
I don't think I knew that. Okay. That's
I started with the glamorous things.
Yeah.
Staking toilets, rebuilding air conditioners, all the fun stuff. But what it did is it gave me a strong work ethic, and I learned that from my parents and from working. And I made it through school and went into advertising and marketing. And my first client was Embassy Suites Hotels.
Oh, that's funny. So you were trying to do something different, but somehow
it came back and got me. But
yeah,
hospitality, they say, stays in your blood. And I think we all get that. Just the service aspect of our industry, it's just in your blood, and you can't help but straighten chairs or greet people and things like that. So and it's contagious. But did that. The way I like to tell the story is Embassy Suites saw talent and they stole me from the agency. And
oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they took me in on the Embassy Suites brand on the corporate team, and started with marketing. And over the years, I took different promotions. At the time, our company also owned Holiday Inns, did marketing for all of the regional associations, some of which were bigger than other hotel brands at the time. Continuing on from there, I spent time in the early years with the Homewood Suites brand, and provided consulting advice to the franchisees to help them get up and open and become profitable as quickly as possible.
Yeah, there's so many parallels to that and to the flex office. That's
absolutely. And what's really great is the same principles really apply into our industry. And I went from the Homewood Suites brand to the Hampton brand, and there was a reorganization. I was one of 3 people that survived the Homewood organization in a down market, and went over to Hampton, and was there from 250 hotels to about 1,300. I headed up all the support, operations, marketing, quality assurance, all of these things that were great building blocks for what I would later do at Abbey Executive Suites and Office Evolution and with folks that I consult with. But I learned a lot of things. And when you have 850 franchisees,
that's what I was going to say. Most of that growth is franchisee growth. So you have the systems, but you're bringing on franchisees who are actually running the locations.
Exactly. And I was held accountable for their performance. So as I grew my team and the different disciplines, we wanted to make sure that the franchisees, first of all, that we had the right franchisees, but as they came on, that they ramped up faster than any other brand. And we accomplished that, getting them to fair share in their market by as quickly as the 3rd or 4th month. The brand was really strong, had a phenomenal team, and we all worked together, using our strengths. And, if people, including our franchisees, if they weren't doing their fair share or pulling their own weight, we would get rid of them. We had strict rules that we followed. They were always, I like to call them firm but fair. And if a franchisee wasn't following the rules, they would, for example, fail their first quality assurance inspection. We'd coach them and tell them what to fix. Then they would have an announced second inspection. If they failed that, we go to what we call the special inspection. Very thorough, with coaching, exact details on what do you need to do. And if they didn't do that, then we would remove them from our system, take down the sign, that kind of thing.
So they could operate as an independent brand, but not under your flag.
Exactly. Yeah. And they had to do things that de-identified them from our brand, even modifying the exterior of their building. But I learned a lot about consistency and how important that is in the success of any brand.
Yeah.
I was hired away to launch a brand called Cambria Suites for Choice Hotels, and launched the brand, built a team, built the brand to scale. and we were signing up a ton of folks. Our pipeline was over 100, and 2009 financing just completely dried up. And I had the opportunity to take a generous package and got to do some consulting for a bit. It was at that time that a recruiter who had told me, as a hospitality-focused recruiter, told me that it was a really good time to take up a hobby.
Oh no!
I was pretty young at the time. Going and playing golf every day was not. It just, that wasn't my thing. So, long story short, he called me about a week later after saying that and said, "Hey, you're from Houston. I've got an opportunity in Houston." And that ended up to be the beginning of me getting into we called the executive suites industry at the time.
Yep.
President and CEO for a guy named Chris Brown, who's one of the pioneers of the industry way back. And we grew that brand from 17 to 25 when I was there. We grew it into a nice regional brand. We turned what had been a kind of a really dated concept and kind of more of a bargain, let's get you in here with discounts kind of brand.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not my DNA. So,
yeah,
put in some signature items, upgraded the team as we could, and had triple digit increases in sales and EBITDA up 140 some odd % during that period. And we ended up selling to Regis. And that was my exit from there. So, did a little bit of consulting there, and I got back into the industry. Michelle Stigler with Premier called me one day and said, "Hey, there is this job you have to hear about." So I was like, "Okay, well, tell me about it." And she said, "You're the only person on the earth that's qualified for it." And I said, "Oh, I'm Jamie, I was nervous. I wasn't sure what she was going to say or where she was going with it." I was like, "Uh-oh, what does that mean?" And it turned out to be Office Evolution. And I had been in the franchising world. I had been an operator, at Abbey. I had the 25 locations. I had scaled Hampton from 250 to 1,300. I knew a lot of people in the industry.
You were the one uniquely qualified. So you mentioned sort of holding franchisees to a quality standard. It's funny because I sort of always think about the flip side of it, which is it feels like a lot of pressure to have franchisees.
Absolutely.
Because they're a very demanding bunch, right? They've started a business, they've invested, maybe retirement savings, like a significant amount of money to open a hotel or a co-working space, which is a physical location. And then they really want it to work and right now. So, so they have a lot of expectations from the corporate team, right? So I feel like you have a lot of demands and pressures from franchisees. It would I'm not sure that would be my favorite model to pursue because of that.
It's a very difficult industry, and you're right. People have no idea what goes into it. When I was at Hampton, we got to the point where we could select which franchisees candidates we wanted. And we would take our best franchisees and get them into markets. So they knew our systems.
Yeah, and they were really committed to So they knew what they were getting. That makes sense.
Yeah, but then when I got over to Office Evolution, you had people who didn't know the industry.
Right.
You remember sitting in GWA meetings and even OBCI where we're going, these people got in because they think it's cool.
Yep. Well, right, because the marketing process for franchises is, you need a funnel, right? You need a funnel, and those people, right, may or may not have any idea, but you're sort of selling them on the concept. It's different from someone who discovers co-working and decides that's what I want to start. I'm going to build my own brand. I mean, it makes sense from a business perspective. I understand that as a scaling model. It just seems intimidating to me.
It is, and it's tough because you're right. I mean, if you have a franchisee that maybe isn't flush with the bank account, you know, and they start to struggle, the first temptation that a lot of people have in business is to cut spending.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm going to not spend as much on marketing. Well,
that's right. You can't save your way to profitability. Somebody said that to me a long time ago, and it's like one of my favorite quotes because it's so tempting. That's like human nature. Cut, right. Turn off the bank accounts, but you can't, right. So you can't fix, especially in our business, you can't, fix customer acquisition problems by not spending any money.
Exactly. And that's where some of the key things that I had to do at Office Evolution was take a company that had been around for a while, founder-led company, and put some systems in place, systems including EOS, but the tech we'd outgrown, the team we'd outgrown. Some of the people had been around since, the first location, and, we're great people and all, but they weren't the right fit for what we needed at the time. And it's hard. It's hard for a founder to get rid of the people that they
or maybe even to recognize, right? But that's part of traction, is the right people on the bus. And those can be really hard decisions to make.
Yeah, the right people and in the right seats.
Yeah.
But so we've gone through hospitality, we've gotten into the industry. Since then, not even by design, but when I left Office Evolution, I immediately got called by some of the vendors and partners and other brands. And one of the first instances of that is Dave Milliken over at Greetly told me. He said, look, I was at your first Office Evolution conference that you were at, and you got up on stage and you told everybody, you shot straight. Here are the areas that you will do well, like the culture that Mark and team had put in place, the whole spirit of Ohana, being family. And then I told them, the things people don't want to hear, your baby's ugly, right? Nobody likes that. So it was tough, but honest. And, that goes back to that firm but fair that I had at Hampton. But it was telling them, we need to work on these things. And what Dave Milliken told me is, he said, you got up on stage that year and, you were new, and you told the story about incremental gains and Nicholas Barrelford and the English bicycle racing team, but how each of these little changes add up, right? And you're not going to get a huge impact from, in the case of the bicycle racing team, changing the pillows that your riders use. But when you combine that with, 100 other things, it can really start making a difference. And I told everybody that's what we had to do. And I focused in on 3 key areas of focus. And we won't go through what those were, but I told the franchisees at this conference, these are the 3 areas that we're going to focus on over the next year. So Dave, telling the story, says, I went there the next year, and the vendors, partners weren't in the same room this year. We were in another room, but I made a point of coming in to hear, okay,
he snuck in. Yeah.
And I like the way that he continued the story. He said, you got up on stage, you showed these are our 3 key areas, and you had actual measurable results for each one of them, and you were able to have accomplished with your team number 1, number 2, and number 3, and details. And then you announced the next the next 3 for the next year, 3 or 4, whatever it was. And he says, I want that in my team. So
right. It sounds so simple, and yet so many businesses don't run that way. And I think oftentimes it's because you have shiny object founders.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's too tempting to get distracted, right? And not focus. I am one of those like shiny object. There's so many things I want to do. And if you focus on too many things, you don't get any one thing, like make significant progress. So
yeah,
that's the beauty of the EOS system. When did you first get introduced to EOS?
Yeah, at the beginning of my tenure at Office Evolution, we wanted to focus, here we just signed a bunch of franchises. Our systems, I knew were not in good order. They were good when they were put in place, but they couldn't handle the stress of the growth. And
yep.
Taken from 27 to 73 in 4 years, that's a lot of openings, right?
Yeah.
So we talked about EOS as a system. As COO of the company, it made sense for me to be what in EOS terms is an integrator. And I'll step back in a minute and talk about EOS, but the integrator is the person who reports into the visionary. And the visionary is that shiny object following, in most cases, founder. And there's nothing wrong with a founder that follows shiny objects. In fact, it's more of the rule than the exception. What they need, and what Chris Brown needed at Abby, was somebody who could take the company to the next level. And Mark wanted that at Office Evolution, and Dave wanted that at Greetly, and so many other people I've worked with. And it's that integrator is the one who runs the weekly meeting. They're the one that makes sure you stay on track. EOS has a 1-year, 3-year, and 10-year plan that you put together, strategic plan. And it really focuses on really 3 components, and then I'll break that down in a second, but it's the vision. If you don't have everybody on the same page on the vision, you're not going to get there. That's something that teams learn very quickly. Traction, instilling that focus and discipline, and very importantly, I think the most important is the accountability. Everybody, I was talking to Nick Clark at Common Desk, they have successfully rolled out EOS all the way down through their whole system. And everybody has something that's measured that they report on in their weekly. They call it an L10 or level 10 meeting. The 10 being you'd like your score to be a 10 for the meeting, but everybody rates it. That doesn't happen for a long time, but it keeps people focused. And that's where you start making that traction, when everybody's executing the vision every day. And what you end up with is a more healthy, functional team. If your team buys in, talking to Tim Slaughter over at Cato, and he said one of the most important things that he's learned is that you have to let EOS sink in, then you have to buy in. So the sinking in is really, what are the mechanics of it? How does it work? Taking that 1-year goal and breaking it into what they call quarterly rocks, which are goals, and then weekly components that you measure in these meetings. And he was saying that once you have everybody bought in, a few things happen. One is you're going to have people self-select out of the team. Nick, Grant Barnhill over at Shift, and Tim and I all have seen that happen.
Interesting. They don't like the structure? Yeah. Is that what's
it could be that they start thinking, wow, this really isn't for me. This isn't what I thought I was signing up for. And that's okay.
Yeah.
If their skill set's better used somewhere else, good. Thank you. We'll fill with somebody who can follow the vision and so forth. And it's not a bad thing. I know when we started EOS at Office Evolution, we sat down with our implementer, who is a certified person in the EOS system it's like your business coach. You go to them for an annual planning meeting, and then each quarter you have an update, help you plan the next quarter, make sure you're on track, make sure the integrator, and in our case, me, is holding everybody in line. And, sometimes helping the integrator reel a founder in. Not that that would have happened there, but, it happens at places.
Yeah.
And it's real important. It's so exciting. I jump around a bit, but we started out with, I think, 7 people sitting at the leadership table. And within a quarter or so, we were down to 4 of us at the table. And 3 of them, we realized either were not in the right role that they should be in. We talk about getting the right people on the bus, but then getting them in the right seat. So we did a little bit of experimenting with one of them, but she was not a good fit. 2 of them, they didn't self-select out, but they made it easy for us to have that hard discussion you've got to have when the organization needs to move on. So each of the folks I mentioned before have been through this kind of process, and it's good. It keeps everybody focused.
Well, and it provides clarity, right? Because without those structures in place, the poor fits, maybe you kind of know, but they're sort of hidden because there's not the right accountability. And what you described, that you were, showing at the conference, like, here's what we're doing this year. Here's what we got done this year. Like, those match. And that is like a dream, right? For a business that's trying to grow, that you have a goal and you get there. And when you're following that, it becomes really clear where I don't, like, weak link, I don't know what you call it, but like where something doesn't fit in pursuing those goals, which can be hard, but is so important because otherwise you can't get there.
Yeah, I learned another benefit from that too, Jamie, is franchise brands typically have a franchise advisory council. So it's made up of, typically elected franchisees. Typically they're better operators, strong voices.
Yep.
And it's not uncommon for them to be very demanding, and
they know that's right. That's my perspective. Yeah.
they want to return, who knows?
Right.
But they also are real quick to say, well, we need to do that. And taking the 3 things that I focused on at the conference, which had some subcomponents, but it was very clear.
Yeah.
I was able to tell them, well, gee, we could do that, but which one of the 3 things that is a core focus are we willing to move aside? Then all of a sudden, it was like, well, you know what? Let's put that on the list to consider for next year. Or, maybe if you can have some people doing a little research on it. But yeah, you're right. Let's focus on, 1, 2, and 3.
So much value in that, even from the person who is forced, even when you're just doing it internally and you don't have that external pressure. Like, that's what I struggle with the process. I would always say that to my teammate, Kristen. Okay, I'm only supposed to have 3 to 5 rocks. I have like 17.
Yes. Yeah.
So, which is not realistic. You cannot get 17 things done in a quarter. So
no, you can't. And if you can, did you do them well?
Right. Meaty things. It's not right. So it's just, it's brutal focus. It's hard. And to your point, when you first implement it, I think this is kind of what you're talking about with like, sort of, how it shakes out and who ends up staying. It's like, it's also not that easy to get good at it. I remember the book saying, like, you'll feel like you're not good at these meetings for a while. And then at some point,
you're not.
Right, you're not, but someday you'll get better at them. So it's okay if your grade is an out of 10 for some period of time.
Exactly. And you mentioned the book, just so everybody knows it. EOS comes from a book called Traction that is written by a guy named Gino Wickman. And he basically took a lot of principles that were in a lot of other business management type books and really distilled the system. And it's really good. And you mentioned the GWA. our annual plan, I'm sure you can't really see it, but there's something called a VTO.
Yep.
And you do your 1-year plan, you do your quarterly rocks, you have an issues list, you do the 3 and 10-year plan, and it really makes you concentrate on, if we really want to be here,
Yep.
what are the stepstones that we need to have in place to get there? And sometimes it weeds out a lot of the stuff that's more noise than anything else.
But also, I think entrepreneurs, aside from shiny objects, tend to be overly optimistic. And so, very grand visions about where we might be in 3 years. And so if you have to really kind of build that up and say, well, then what needs to happen? And you force yourself through that framework, it becomes more realistic and achievable. You end up with something achievable, which I suspect is actually really a strong recruiting and retention tool once you have that in place, because you have a lot of clarity around where the gaps are, but also when you hire people, everybody's on the same page about what you're trying to accomplish, and recruits get the sense like, oh, this is a very focused company where things are happening. And I think people want to be, a part of that.
Yeah, and how many times have all of us accepted a role somewhere and you got in the job, it's like, well, wait a minute, that's not what we talked about, and what's all this stuff?
Yep.
Like the executive director job. No, I'm kidding.
No, well, that might be fair, although I will argue you probably knew what you were getting into there.
Yeah, I had a little tip, but
exactly.
It really is a good system, and it focuses what is your vision, and you talk about it taking some time. We talked about Tim Slaughter saying, you got to let it soak in, and then really completely buy in. But Nick over at Commodus said, one of their values was get rest, stay rested or get plenty of rest. And they realized over time that's not really a value. And it's funny, he was telling me, he goes, yeah, so we'd have our meetings, and then we'd go out for drinks afterwards, and I don't know what we were doing, but we certainly weren't getting rested,
right?
Exactly. So what I loved is he said, we took a step back and thought about, well, how do we get there? And it was along the lines of do whatever it takes. And that has resonated so well with their team that a bunch of his team members got tattooed on the inside of their lip, do whatever it takes. Or, oh no, I'm sorry, Daymaker is what they put in there, because they want to make your day, and they do whatever it takes to do that.
Yeah.
I don't recommend that, by the way.
Even that, like the sort of the do whatever it takes or philosophy is not for everyone. And so the fact that they have that clarity and they can talk about that when they're recruiting, then folks can self-select out of that mentality.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's better to know on the front end than on the back end. But people get to hear candidates, what's your vision? What kind of people do you have in your organization? What data do you use and measure? I mean, that's real important to be successful in a role. What issues are there? And what are your processes that help get you that traction for your business? So it all works really well together, and it does take time. Yeah.
It takes time and discipline. So related to that, if somebody is interested in, starting EOS and they're not using it now, is there a team that you think is just too small for the approach? I mean, the GWA was fairly small, so I'd love to have you talk. Yeah, just kind of like, how do people get started if they want to find? And you are also certified, which is somewhat new.
Yeah, actually, my next step is an official certification. I've completed the gosh, what's it called? I'm one step before that and working towards the certification.
Okay, got it.
I'm a graduate of the master class, and really, really excellent. But I help companies, decide on is it right for you? You talk about the what's the sweet spot? Some people say it's 25 employees to 200. Typically, it's an entrepreneur-led company. Those are guidelines, not rules. What I would tell you is if you have a big enough organization where somebody can be the integrator, that person who keeps the train running on time,
it's ideal.
Yeah, keeps the.
I think that was the problem I was having implementing it. Was I am like the the squirrel chaser, but I was playing the role of integrator and trying to rein myself in at the same time, which is not really how it's supposed to work.
It's hard to be both, right? I mean,
yes.
You're this, but on the other hand, you're this. And what I would say is that there are companies that self-implement, but what I find is that they read the book, they download some of the tools that are online at EOS.com, and they try it on their own. The problem is that there tends to be leniency. There still tends to be shiny objects. Those kinds of things. So
and that feeling that we're not doing this right. Is it working? Is it because it's hard at the beginning?
And there are people like me that coach companies and help them get up to speed. And for example, I've helped companies actually being a fractional member of their team, where technically everybody reports up into the integrator who reports to the visionary. So it would be holding that leadership L10 every week. It would be the point person for all of those people. And then I would help them put together their L10s for their team. So that weekly meeting where everything's measured and scored and put into goals. So you can have somebody who's fractional, you can have somebody who's full-time, you can have somebody who really just helps you roll it out. And then there are professional implementers. And the three groups that I mentioned earlier, as well as Office Evolution, use these implementers. And they're another step higher in the EOS chain. And they don't work with your team on a daily basis. I mean, they'll take your calls and coach and that kind of thing, but their main function is to help you get your 1 year, 3 year, and 10 year plan done at an annual meeting. And then meet with you for what they call a quarterly pulse. So your pulse each quarter. And it's good because even as an integrator, trying to follow the system, every now and then you need to get realigned. And those people are good at doing it and bringing stories of other companies and best demonstrated practices with them.
Right. That makes sense. Sid is on the board. They have an implementer that they work with for their team is growing. And so I'm sure there's a tremendous amount of value for them. And I know a few other people who do that. And I think there's a lot of value in making that investment because, we sometimes are not as good as we think we're going to be at DIYing things.
Yeah, it's not as simple as a short YouTube video to fix the dryer, right?
Exactly. So, okay, first step is buy the book. Yeah, and read through the book. And then what would you recommend for somebody who's thinking about it?
Yeah, Traction's a little clunky to read. That's what they recommend you read, but there's one that's really geared more towards the employees, but I find it a good introduction. It's called What the Heck is EOS? Oh,
okay.
And to me, it's a little easier read.
Okay.
Once you decide you want to do it, you've got to decide, are we going to bring in an implementer? On the EOS site, there's an implementer finder. Depending where you live, I may be able to help you find that implementer that does the annual and the 4 times a year. I've helped some people who are self-implementing by serving as that role. And I've actually been, as I mentioned, fractional integrator for some companies. Typically, it takes 2 years to really get EOS totally smooth. Not totally smooth, but running like a champ. but you can see benefits almost immediately.
Totally. Yeah. Just, yes.
A
Agreed.
really good other thing is there's a book called Rocket Fuel. And it's all about the dynamic between that entrepreneurial founder, the visionary, and the integrator. And there's some really great tips there, how to help make it work. And it's really hard for somebody who founded a company to let go of anything. And I've been at multiple companies where you have to earn the respect of the founder, but sometimes you still have to pull the to get that. And you got to build the trust, but you've got to have the full buy-in, as several of the folks have mentioned.
Yeah, I love that. I'm just sticking those 2 books in the show notes because I have not heard of What the Heck is EOS, but I did read Rocket Fuel, and it really helps. Yeah, if you're if you're an in denial founder who thinks you're an integrator or you don't yet know you need an integrator, it's really helpful, even just to read it, to get the perspective of like, where do I fit? Am I an integrator or am I the visionary? And what do those roles look like? Yeah, I love
exactly.
That. Yeah,
actually, I prefer to listen to these on some of the Audible. Yeah, Audible's where I listen to them. But what I found is then I like to go back into the book and kind of mark it up and put Post-it notes and have things that I like to refer to.
Yep, totally. Yeah, exactly. I do the same. I'll listen and then go make my notes. Or sometimes write myself notes if I'm like walking the dogs and listening to something, and open up my little notes app and make notes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. This has been super helpful. William, if folks are interested in what you're working on and getting some of your particular support, where do we find you? How do people reach out to you?
I'm going to give you the easiest way to reach me, which is just go to my email, which is William L. Edmundson, EDMUNDSON @gmail.com, or I welcome people to connect with me on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, of course, there's my background and some of the success stories that I've had helping companies out or grow or scale. So I welcome people to check me out there.
Okay, perfect. I put your email address in the show notes as well. And the show notes are always on the Everything Coworking website. So if you're listening and you're driving and you can't write down the email address, you can always find it there. Okay, William, let's end with a bigger picture question, which is what excites you the most about the co-working flexible office industry right now?
Oh my gosh, we had like this super duper accelerant with COVID.
Yeah.
We all knew that the way people work was going to change, but this is amazing, and we could see it at the GWA conference. Now all of a sudden we've got the commercial real estate and building owners and so forth, and our longer term plans of widening the tent are accelerating because it's reality. If you don't believe that the flexible office is the future, then you're in denial.
You have your earmuffs on. Yep.
No two ways about it. What I think is going to happen, going back to my previous career, is, I was fortunate enough to see the hotel industry break into segmentation. And what I mean by that is not everybody wants to pay the same or expects the same. Do I love a Ritz-Carlton or a Conrad hotel? Yeah, who wouldn't? But is a Hampton Inn outstanding and meets my needs every time? Sure. But what we're going to see is different types of companies, and people at different levels within all companies are going to have different needs based on what they do and so forth. Some people are just going to have to go to the office. I mean, you can't take your factory with you or whatever, but we're going to see segmentation. We're going to see different levels of amenities. We're going to see all of those things, and there's going to be a shakeout. There'll be some consolidation. There'll be companies that rebrand. That's something that I had some good experience in the hotel industry with, reinventing Hampton Inns. And it's just a reality. Companies are going to have to do that, and needs have changed. So I'm so excited about all of the changes that are going to be coming, and just the pace at which I think it's going to happen.
It's happening. There's a lot happening, and it's happening fast.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love it.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for everything that you do for the industry and for sharing your perspective. You do have a unique, I love what Michelle said. You might be the only person on this planet that you bring a really unique perspective to the table from your experience. And I have a feeling the next few years are going to be pretty exciting for you as well.
I am sure that it will be exciting for all of us, Jamie.
Yeah.
And I did want to do one shameless plug for the GWA.
Plug
if you're
away.
Not already a member, what's holding you back? Come on. And you can go to globalworkspace.org and sign up. You can also, we've got the dates for our conference for next September in there. And we actually are hoping that people will sign up early. And I think we did a great job on content. We had some fantastic folks. Jamie, you're always so helpful in helping us make that happen.
It takes a village. I mean, that's
oh my God, it does indeed.
Yeah,
we're like ants carrying something to the mound. But make sure that you come to the next one. If you didn't see this one, sorry you missed out. It was a lot of fun. Jamie, thank you for your time. Thank you for all of your listeners. And, feel free to reach out to me at email or over LinkedIn.
Perfect. Thank you, William.